Hey friends, this will be my very first LECA passive hydroponics video. I started posting about LECA just in my Instagram stories and on TikTok, and there's been so much interest that I thought I would spend some time explaining how I got started, how you can get started, and what it takes to transfer your plants if you're interested in going down this route. If you found this video and you're like, what is she talking about? What is LECA? Allow me to explain. LECA stands for Lightweight Expanded Clay Aggregate. And what it is simply clay balls that have been heated and they expand and almost pop. And as a result of that process, they're extremely porous, which allows water to wick upwards. So it's just a different growing medium. So what I'm doing is passive hydroponics. So a lot of questions I get asked is, can you use it in soil? And the answer is yes. You can use it in soil. It can provide aeration to your soil and increase drainage. However, what I'm doing is I'm using LECA in a passive hydroponics system. So I'm using no soil. And the reason I'm doing this is because I wanted less fungus gnats and pests in my home. And also I didn't want to deal with mold or other things that can grow on naturally in soil. When I first started, it took a long time to figure out, to make the first jump. And I would say if you're just now getting started, it can feel a little daunting to pull a perfectly healthy plant in soil and put it into LECA. And so I'm gonna give you a couple tips to show you how to step into that without it being so much in the beginning. So if you're just getting started and you don't have anything set up for LECA, for passive hydroponics, but you're thinking of starting, here are the 5 things that I would definitely buy or find around your house now. 1, obviously you want the LECA, and I'll cover where you can get that later in the video. 2, you need a bucket to soak the LECA in and a strainer. Actually, it's 3 things. You need a bucket and a strainer, or some way to rinse and soak your LECA, and I'll cover how to do that later. You need a vessel. So I will go into detail over the different vessels that I use for the plants, but it can range from clear glass vases to mason jars to upcycled yogurt containers that I drilled holes in. The important part when you're getting set up for LECA is you need something that is watertight that will hold the water reservoir. That's the key to LECA, is keeping the water reservoir filled for your plant so the LECA can wick the water upwards to the roots. So those are the 3 or 4 main things I would say you absolutely need to get started. Again, you could probably find most of those things in your home with the exception of the LECA. And here are 2 optional things that I think are extremely helpful and will help your plants thrive. 1 is Super Thrive. A lot of people have had success using Super Thrive and they use it religiously. What it is, it's not nutrients, it's just vitamins for your plants that help reduce shock. So when you first transfer a plant, you're not going to just throw it in with a bunch of nutrients right away. As it's transitioning, it needs a period to do just that, to transition. And providing Super Thrive helps it with that. I think it costs $7 or $9, I can't remember. Also from my local hydroponics store, but it's also available online. This is pretty widely used. And instead of using my dropper straight into the bottle, I had these amber glass dropper bottles just in the house anyway for other things. So I poured some into here so I don't have to keep pulling from the original bottle. It helps reduce contaminants that way and allows me to keep this stored in the refrigerator longer. So I keep both of these stored in the refrigerator and I just take out this one when it comes time to adding Super Thrive to my water. This is optional, but you could also get a pH test indicator. This is all it is. It's just a solution and a vial. You pour the water halfway into the vial, add a few drops, and you can check to see what your pH should be. Again, it should be between 5.5 and 6.5. That's the ideal indoor plants pH that they prefer. Some plants are different. Some plants in soil like higher pH, you might have heard that, but for hydro, you should stick to between 5.5 and 6.5. The reason why I recommend getting a pH test kit first is because you might want to test your water to see how acidic or basic it is. If your normal tap water tends to be on one side of the spectrum, you're going to need to adjust it, and all you need is a pH up-down kit. It's another solution. My tap water ended up being like a perfect 6.0. I don't have to change it. I don't have to adjust the pH of my water, which is convenient. But if your you know, if you have a system where the pH is a little different, you might have to work a little harder. So that's something to consider right away as you're transferring your plants. In order to get started with LECA, you obviously need LECA, and I buy them at a local hydroponics store that's up the road from me, but you can also get them online. Amazon's prices fluctuate. Sometimes I see, depending on the demand, some very high prices. Just so you have a point of reference, a 50-liter bag that I got locally from my hydroponics store cost me about $33. You can get it at pet stores. They might call it something different. They might call it clay pebbles, clay balls. I know at IKEA they call it Adla, but you know how IKEA has different names for everything. So the first thing you want to do when you get your LECA is wash and soak it. And it can be very dusty, so you want to make sure you wash it really well. And here's how I do that. I do it outside because I have a hose and I can also water the grass at the same time. So I would rinse the LECA really well in a strainer. So go over it for a couple of minutes to help get some of that initial clay dust off. And then I put it inside of a larger bucket or a large bowl, and I let it soak overnight. And the reason why you want to do that is because the LECA can be very dry on the inside unless water has had a chance to soak in through the LECA. And if you were to plant your plant without soaking it overnight, it would absorb the water pretty quickly, which, you know, you could potentially just resolve by adding water the next day if you were to monitor the water levels well. But if you weren't monitoring the water levels well, you run the risk of it drying out your plant, because you never want your LECA to get dry in its container, because it can actually absorb moisture. It can pull moisture from your plants. So rinse and soak your LECA. After I soak it, I give it a few more rinses, rinse it out really well, and then it's just about ready. You don't need to disinfect it unless you're getting old LECA. But if it's coming brand new in a bag, it shouldn't have any organic material that would lead to a situation in your LECA reservoir where it would be breeding bacteria or other growth. So as long as you've rinsed it and soaked it and rinsed it again, I'd say you're ready to go. So after you've rinsed and soaked your LECA, you're ready to start transferring plants. Now, when it comes to deciding which plant you should transfer first, I would always say start with a healthy plant that you already have in soil. If you happen to have any water propagated plants already set up with roots ready to go, that's actually the best place to start, because those water roots are already primed for a water environment. If you were going to transfer them to soil, would actually need a little time to adjust their root system in the new environment. So let's talk about LECA setups. If you've seen any of my social media videos, you know I use glass containers like this, just mason jars. I'll use vases, and I also will use a very traditional way to set things up, and that is, a net pot, like a pot that is specifically designed for passive hydroponics. It's got all these holes in a catch pot, and the catch pot is the outer pot. The most important thing about your catch pot is that it shouldn't absorb water. So it can't be terracotta, it can't be an unglazed ceramic, it can't be a ceramic pot with cracks in it. It's ideal if it's watertight. IKEA has some really great planters that have no drainage, much to the disappointment of soil-based plant owners, because you often have to drill holes in the bottom of IKEA pots. Well, extremely useful for getting set up in passive hydroponics. So here's a traditional setup with a net pot and a catch pot. I'll tell you some of the reasons why this is easier, and some of the reasons why I also don't think it's necessary to go out and buy these. This net pot cost me about $3, which, you know, is cheap, but over time, as you need to size up for your plant as it gets bigger, or you have lots of plants, the cost really can add up. But one of the most beneficial things of having a net pot that's set up inside of a catch pot, as opposed to a no net pot system, is that it's easier to rinse your LECA, which is really important in the beginning. When you just set up a transferred plant from soil, you're going to want to rinse out this LECA every 3 to 4 days for about a week. And I say that because the plant is transitioning and shedding some of its soil roots, and it may just be shedding soil that didn't wash off in the transfer process. So the net pot makes it somewhat easier to do that rinsing. However, it's not 100% necessary. You know, the other thing about the net pot is in order to see the water reservoir, you have to lift the thing up and check here at the bottom, which is easy enough. But the cool thing about the glass vase method is that you can see exactly where your roots are growing and where your water reservoir is, which takes some of the guesswork out without having to lift up your pot. And it's easier just to like pass by and monitor your plant. And I don't know, I like the aesthetics of this, so I have them both ways. So yes, you can do a traditional net pot method, or you can do, you know, cheap glass vases that you get on at thrift stores, or, you know, Goodwill or Facebook Marketplace. For some of my pots that I wanted a net pot system, I actually would save old nursery pots or yogurt containers, and I would drill holes in the side. Not all plastic can sustain that level of like manipulation, but nursery pots, in my experience, can sustain having holes drilled in them, and then it just reduces plastic too. So consider what you have around your house: yogurt containers, cream cheese containers. There's so much plastic. Takeout containers even. Well, I've used old soup containers. You can be more resourceful as long as you have a drill or some way to poke a hole. We'll cover nutrients in another video because it's a much more involved process, but just a few highlights about what you might need to know. There's sort of two trains of thought in the passive hydroponic, at least that I've seen in the passive hydroponic community, and that is, you use specialized nutrients for hydroponic systems, or do you make your own? And some people are super creative. They use fish tank water, because fish poo adds a lot of nutrients to the fish tank water, and that's great. I do not have a fish tank, and I don't have the time necessarily to brew my own nutrients. So I went with a ready-made, this is sort of what everyone uses, nutrient trio from General Hydroponics. I didn't even buy that right away because I knew that my plants would not need nutrients right away.
Here's a little house tour of some of the plants that I have in LECA. Thank you so much for watching. I truly hope this video was helpful for you if you're just getting started in your LECA journey. Please like and subscribe, and I hope to get future videos out about nutrients and transferring and helping you grow happy plants in your home. That's it for now. Take care.